Strip club pot deal. If you've read my previous story about the horny 10-year-old kid, you'd think New Orleans is a pretty bad place to visit. It's really not. You can be safe as long as you listen to your instincts. If something seems off, get out of the situation as best as you can. Because of Hurricane Katrina, I no longer live in New Orleans, but I visit time to time because my boyfriend is from there and has family still there. One night, we decided to go to the French Quarter and hit up Bourbon Street. It's probably the only street most people know, and it's pretty much the end of the part most people visit. From Bourbon to the river, it's crowded. North of Bourbon, it's empty. When we got to Bourbon, we split up. He wanted to go to a strip club, and I wanted to walk around a bit, pop into some shops, and maybe find a beer that wasn't $9. I wandered about Bourbon, looking at the antique shops on Royal, went down and checked out Jackson Square, then looped back to Bourbon. Took me about a half hour to do so. As I was walking down Bourbon to the strip club, I saw my boyfriend standing out front, waving at me. I walked over to him, and he said he was ready to leave, so we started heading back to the car. On the way, he told me about a strange encounter he'd had with some random guy on the street. My boyfriend had gone outside for a smoke a little while earlier. He rolls his cigarette by hand. He buys a pouch of tobacco and uses rolling papers to make a cigarette. Because of this, a lot of people think it's pot. You know how many times we've been asked about it? Evidently, some guy saw him doing this and thought he would be interested in buying some pot. Neither one of us smokes pot, so my boyfriend was not interested. The guy, however, was insistent. "I've got some good stuff, man. Just come around the corner and we'll make a deal." Alarm bells are going in my boyfriend's head. Generally, drug dealers don't approach you, despite what 80s PSAs would have you believe. You are generally introduced to them by people you know who can vouch for you. Gotta avoid the narcs, right? My boyfriend refused, again, and the guy pushed some more. "It's real good stuff. I'll give you a great deal. Let's just walk around the corner, huh?" My boyfriend did not want to get off Bourbon and go down the deserted side of the street the guy suggested. Eventually, the guy left him alone, but the experience made him feel uneasy, so he was relieved when I showed up a few minutes later. After he told me about it, he explains his theories on what the deal was with this unprofessional drug dealer. Theory 1 is that there was no pot, and the guy was just trying to get him to a deserted street so he can mug my boyfriend. Possible. Theory 2 is that there were no drugs and the guy was a cop, and wanted to lure my boyfriend off of a crowded street so they could make an arrest without drawing too much attention. Also possible. Theory 3 is that the guy was going to rip him off and sell him some catnip or some other fake weed. I don't think either of us thought the deal was legit in any way anyways. He was just trying way too hard, according to my boyfriend. So, random guy that tried to sell my boyfriend weed. Let's not meet again. Drug deals. I'm not one to ever pass up an opportunity for a good deal of some high-grade cannabis. So when I received a text from a friend of mine telling me he could sell me a quarter ounce of some good shit for $25, I jumped at the chance. He led me on all day, telling me that he would be dropping it off in the evening. Evening came, and so did the text saying he'd drop it off by later that night. And finally, at 11:30 at night, I received a text that sent a ping of anxiety running through me. "Sup, man? I'm heading out of town for the night. Your sack is in the garage under the ladder." I knew exactly what this entailed. I was to walk the 5 blocks to his old residence, a mutual friend's house where he lived in a loft in the garage, slip in unnoticed by the neighbors, search until I found it, leave the money, and be on my merry way. Simple, right? The walk started off sketchy enough, with the lone streetlight on the block going out as I left, plunging me into this unnatural pseudo-darkness. I walked along the silence, the only sound coming from the highway some distance away. I've walked this walk before, even at this hour, but I couldn't shake this anticipation in my gut. I reached the house, which I must say is absolutely terrifying at night. Something just didn't seem right. My friend is very strict with his bedtimes. This meant that the house was dark at exactly 10 p.m. each night. Tonight, though, there was a glow coming from the first floor. This could have been a number of things. Maybe he had other friends over, brought a girl home, getting a late-night snack. I quickly reassured myself as I stepped through the door into the pitch-black garage. I closed the door behind me and got to searching. The garage is separated into an upstairs and a downstairs to save space. Upstairs there is a washer and dryer, while downstairs was box storage that led under the stairs, forming a cave-like lair. Not going to lie, it felt like a robbery simulator, rummaging through my friend's garage unnoticed, looking for drugs. My heart began to race at the thought. It really started racing though, when I heard the heavy footsteps stomping their way towards the inside garage entrance. I had kicked a paint can on accident, so they probably heard it. Now my first instinct told me that I should make myself known. It was my friend's place after all. He probably even knew about the whole deal. We'd laugh, he'd point out where it was, and I'd be on my merry way. That's when I realized something. My friend does not own a single pair of boots. In a split second, I had ducked down under the floorboards behind some boxes. The door outside was quite far away, the footsteps quickly approaching, so escape was not an option. I had to hide it out. I was so confused, I felt like I was in a slasher movie, hand over my mouth to keep from hyperventilating and everything. I listened as the door slammed open, the footsteps creaking slowly along the floorboards just inches to my right. They paced around the garage for what seemed like ages, grunting and taking heavy, labored breaths. They stopped at the top of the stairs, never making their way down, though. So soon enough, they made their way back into the house, slamming the door behind them. As soon as the door clicked, I bolted, but I didn't stop running until I was back home, tucked away in my bed, every single light in the house on for the rest of the night. I wasn't about to get the cops involved with the situation, lest they go searching and get my friend in trouble, so I simply sent him a text message and went to sleep. I awoke to 2 texts in the morning. The first was a message from my dealer friend asking me if I was alright. The second was a text from the friend who owned the house, telling me he got stuck at a friend's house overnight. I was so fucking confused. Later that day, the friend with the house sent me a news link over Facebook with no caption. It was a news report about a burglary murder that took place on my friend's street. 2 houses had already been confirmed as being broken into in the middle of the night. The first was the home of an injured veteran. He was found in a bedroom, a 9mm slug lodged into his head, all the valuables in the house gone. The second house was my friend's. My last drug deal ever. Kinda long, so please bear with me. Back in my early 20s, I moved to Melbourne to go to university. Because of some of my dodgy mates I knew from outside of my university, I somehow got wound up as the go-to get guy for drugs with my classmates. I fucking hated the reputation, but maybe felt a little bit cool at the same time. Ecstasy and speed mostly. I was at the bottom of the drug dealer food chain, the type of idiot who jacks up the price by $10 a pill so he can make enough money to drink and party. I had no guilt of ripping these people off. These were mostly rich kids who lived with their parents and didn't have a job to support themselves through university. Dealing them drugs was so easy and non-threatening. A few years after I finished university, I was working an office job that was boring and paid peanuts. But now my friends and I had pretty much grown out of the desire to take drugs on the weekends. Dinner parties with good food, good wine, and good conversation was more our idea of fun now. My drug dealing days had been well and truly finished. Or so I thought. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I just got home from a draining day at work and was exhausted and in a bad mood. I plonked myself onto the couch and stared at the ceiling, trying to muster up the energy to get up and shower before bed. My phone starts flashing and vibrating on the coffee table next to me. I looked, and the caller ID was T-Bone, the nickname I had for a guy who I met at a festival years ago and ended up spending a bit of time with here and there. He was a huge, friendly, weed-smoking, acid-tripping hipster with an impressive beard. I hadn't spoken to this guy in well over a year, so when I saw his caller ID on my phone, I immediately thought, he needs drugs. I answered, and we exchanged some pleasantries, and then I could hear the tone in his voice change to that awkward, "Hey, could I ask you for a favor" tone. He wanted drugs, and lots of them. $2,000 worth to be precise. When I asked him what specifically he wanted he just said, "As many ecstasies and bags of speed as that can get." He laughed. This was way outside of my comfort zone. Even when I was dealing back in university, 10 pills was usually the maximum. It was late, I was tired, but I was also broke and figured I could make an easy $500 after purchasing from one of my guys I used to buy from, something which T-Bone didn't need to know. I told T-Bone that I would call him back and see what I can do. To my surprise, the first person I called was Stover, and he was able to help me out, and he was only a 5-minute drive away from me. We discussed the terms and conditions, which seemed reasonable: 60 E's and 3 grams of speed for $1,500. I called T-Bone, and he was happy to part with the $2K for this amount. I met Stover out front of his luxurious apartment building. We had a quick chat, and he joked about wanting to meet the guy I'm selling to. We shook hands, and I was on my way to T-Bone. I asked T-Bone where he wanted to meet, and he told me where he was. I Google mapped the address. It was a 45-minute drive from me. Had I known he was this far away, I wouldn't have agreed to sell him anything, but I couldn't back out now. The address he gave me was probably in one of the worst neighborhoods in Australia, known for its violent crimes, murder, and of course, drug dealing. For anyone reading this living outside of Australia, they certainly don't show this shithole in the tourist brochures. I also won't mention the name of the place because I don't want to offend anyone reading this that might actually live there. I started the journey. I now had plenty of time to think about how stupid I am. I had a ridiculously illegal amount of drugs on me, driving out to the roughest neighborhood in the country. After ages of sitting on the freeway, I took the exit and was approaching my destination. At this point, I was so tired that I was in an almost dreamlike state. Every set of lights I pulled up to, people in cars next to me would give me greasy looks, trying to act hard and start a confrontation. I pulled up in the street where the house was. "Your destination is on your left," my phone told me. The street was so dark because the streetlights were out and there was cloud cover, so no moon. I couldn't see shit. The houses in the street look abandoned and sad. This didn't feel right. The house that T-Bone said he was had boarded up front windows with shitty graffiti tags on them, and there wasn't any lights on. I called T-Bone, no answer. For fuck's sakes, I redialed and thought it was about to ring out when he picked up. "Hey, T-Bone, I'm out front, man." "Ah, cool, come on in," he said. No, come out to the car, man," I replied. Hang on a sec, he said and hung up. I was thinking, shit, I hardly knew this guy. He had been to a few parties I went to, we hung out, but I don't know anything about him, really. I saw him emerge from the side of the house, pushing through bushes that blocked the pathway. I was the only car parked on the street. He saw me and gestured for me to come over. I had no idea who he was with, so I thought it was time to get into character. I took my jacket off, so I was only wearing a white singlet, and put my filthy black trucker cap on that I kept in the glove box. I was hoping this would help me to look a bit more don't fuck with me. My friends often joked about how I look tougher than I am. I have some football and kickboxing-induced facial scars, combined with a pretty large physique from smashing weights for years. I was big enough and scary-looking enough to be intimidating. But truth be known, I'm a fucking marshmallow who avoids confrontations. I shook hands with T-Bone in the front yard of this place. I felt at ease when he gave me a happy greeting and thanked me for coming out this way. He told me to follow him, and we went through the bushes around to the back of this place. I could hear music. Sounds like they were pumping dubstep through shitty distorted speakers. I could hear a few people's voices, and I could smell cigarette smoke. T-Bone ripped the back door open, and the smell and sound hit me harder. I've been to some nasty house parties, but this one was horrific. There were 3 of them in the kitchen. There was a flashlight attached by string to a 12-foot ceiling, swinging back and forward, slowly like a pendulum style. This was the only lighting. The swinging light made it difficult to see the people in the kitchen, but with each sway, I could catch a glimpse of their faces. They were absolute toothless junkies, all shirtless, skinny with bad tattoos. We entered the kitchen, and one of them closed the door behind us and stood in front with his arms folded as if he were guarding it. One of them came forward and told me that his name was Jay. Not like he was introducing himself, it was more of a statement. His face was full-blown meth fucked. He sized me up, and then looked at T-Bone and said, "I thought you fucking said he was a fucking pussy cunt." T-Bone looked at him in total shock. As Jay turned to T-Bone, the flashlight swung past and I noticed he was holding a big screwdriver behind his back. Now I realized what was happening and felt like an idiot. I've walked into a fucking ambush. Get a guy with a shitload of drugs to come around and rob him. Fuck. Jay turned to me. He was about 6 feet away from me. He showed me the screwdriver and said, "What you got for me?" With a big front teeth missing smile. The fact I was so tired and pissed off kind of worked for me because I didn't show that I was shitting myself. I squared up to him and said in no nonsense tone, "Give me the cash and I'll show you." To which Jay replied, "Nah, cunt. Didn't T-Bone tell ya? These are on tick, mate." On tick, meaning I'll pay you later or never in this case. I looked at T-Bone, who looked back at me and shook his head and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Jay looked at me with such hatred, it looked as though he was in pain. "Give us the fucking gear, Gunt." If it wasn't so dark in his shithole, he could have easily seen my overinflated pocket, where the drugs were stashed in an envelope. I looked at the guy in front of the door, and as soon as our eyes met, he put his arm over the door handle, confirming that he wasn't going to let me leave. We all stood there, trading glances. The swinging light made everyone's shadows look like they were moving. Jay didn't like this. T-Bone broke the silence and said, Jay, chill the fuck out and I'll get the money, okay?" And he left the kitchen. I thought he was going to bail on me. Jay slowly came towards me, pointing the screwdriver at me. He said in a raspy, matter-of-fact tone, "I'll fucking kill ya! I'll do the fucking time, fucking try me!" "That's cute," I replied. Then the painful anger came back into his face. I'd never seen anything like this. I slowly put my feet into fight stance to prepare myself for what was about to happen. T-Bone walked back in and said, Here's the cash," which briefly diffused the situation. I did a quick count. It was $1,700, close enough. I threw the envelope of gear to Jay, and the door guard moved, and I got the fuck out. T-Bone followed me, and he tried to give me an apology. "Mate, man, I had no fucking idea that shit was gonna happen, man. I'm so sorry." I just said, "You owe me $300, and drove away. I never got the extra $300, and I never dealt drugs again. I also, thankfully, never met Jay again.